Jane Hopper, originally named Jane Ives and better known as 11 or L, was born with special abilities or superpowers in Hawkins, Indiana in the spring of 1971 to single mother Terry Ives. Jane would never really get the chance to know her mother because she was immediately abducted at birth to become a subject as part of the government experiment MKUltra. 11's biological father is not present and never mentioned, which means he was only part of Terry's life briefly, or that Terry was somehow intentionally impregnated without her knowing while she was being experimented on. Jane would receive the name 11, which she would later become best known by as nothing more than a numbered label, as she was one of several children that were treated as government test subjects through the Hawkins branch of MKUltra under Dr. Martin Brenner. Dr. Brenner and everyone involved with Hawkins' lab would look at 11 and the other children as man-made creations, with Dr. Brenner as sort of a Dr. Frankenstein. This, along with several events in her childhood, led 11 to believe that she is an actual monster. However, unlike most of the other children from this experiment, 11 would go on to escape from Hawkins' lab and prove to be humanity's only hope of survival against the villain known as Vecna, who would do everything he could to destroy life as we know it, which is said repeatedly.
We are talking about the destruction of our world as we know it.
They're not the only ones in danger. It's life as we know it.
To find out why 11 sees her life as a modern-day Frankenstein, how she garnered an extensive criminal history, the real reason she lost her powers and memories, and her true fate at the end of Stranger Things, stick around to the end of this video.
This video is sponsored by Factor.
Welcome to Horror History, episode 11. I mean, this is actually episode 80 if we're going by the production code, so that's kind of confusing. I've mentioned in many other episodes of Horror History that Stephen King is one of the core influences on the Duffer Brothers in the creation of Stranger Things. It'll come as no surprise that 11 is very directly inspired by Stephen King characters, but most specifically, Charlie McGee from the book Firestarter. In a 2016 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Matt Duffer explained just how much Firestarter influenced the show. We literally took the Firestarter paperback and pasted a picture of a bike on top of it and changed the font to our font. So yeah, and that was the idea. This is what it felt like when we were in middle school or high school reading those paperbacks. So that's what we wanted it to evoke. Firestarter is a story about a girl named Charlie whose parents were volunteer participants in MKUltra. They're given a drug called Lot 6, and this gives her parents, Andy and Victoria, the abilities of mind control and telekinesis. However, their special abilities are very muted compared to Charlie's. When Charlie is born, she has the ability to start fires with her mind, but her ability is so strong that she can't control it, and it seeps out whenever Charlie is emotional or upset. At one point in the story, Charlie even accidentally burns up her mother's hands during a temper tantrum. Charlie is taught to see this ability as the bad thing, and is trained to do her best to suppress it. The majority of the story is focused on Charlie and her father Andy being on the run from a secret government agency known as the Shop. 11's life would draw pretty direct parallels to Charlie's, and this is not subtle.
Says she's special, born with abilities.
Abilities?
You read any Stephen King?
Even some of the original poster art for Stranger Things intentionally pays homage to the 1984 film Firestarter starring Drew Barrymore. But to fully understand the origins of 11's special abilities, we need to take it all the way back to the 1950s, at the start of the program known as MKUltra. During the 1950s, the US was engaged in the Cold War. The government at the time feared that Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean agents could be brainwashing US prisoners of war with mind control in Korea. In response, the Central Intelligence Agency approved Project MKUltra in 1953. The purpose was to develop techniques that could be used against enemies to control human behavior with drugs and other psychological manipulators. Over the next 10+ years, scientists overseeing MKUltra would experiment with mind-altering substances, as well as other techniques such as electroshock therapy. Many of MKUltra's test subjects were volunteers, but many did not really comprehend what they were signing up for. 11's mother was amongst the people who volunteered, but had no idea what she was getting herself into.
She was a part of some study in college.
MKUltra.
Yeah, that's the one. It was started in the 50s. By the time Terry got involved, it was supposed to be ramping down, but the drugs just got crazier. Messed her up good.
While most of MKUltra's tests were performed between 1953 and 1964, the project was not officially brought to a halt until 1973. It makes sense that by the time Terry got involved with MKUltra, which would be 1970 or 1971, the drugs and techniques being tested would go beyond typical psychedelics like LSD. The extent of how these experiments affected Terry is not known. She did demonstrate some kind of special ability, as it's discovered in 1984 that she's able to make the lights in her house flicker with her mind. But whether or not Dr. Brenner and those studying Terry were aware of this is unknown. Most likely, she was just like Andy and Victoria in Firestarter. They had powers, but they were very weak in comparison to their daughters. As a result, just like the shop in Firestarter, what Dr. Brenner was interested in was far more sinister.
The thing is, though, is that she didn't know she was pregnant at the time. Jane.
When Dr. Brenner learned that Terry was pregnant, it was the exact opportunity he'd been hoping for. While the adults being studied were apparently not yielding the results that Dr. Brenner hypothesized, their children were a resource he could tap into. He could essentially create a whole army of human weapons to defeat the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War, or at least that was his hope. At the peak of his experiment, there were at least 18 children with special abilities. It is a little hard to believe that all of these parents just coincidentally got pregnant while in the program. 18 coincidences within about a 10-year time frame? That's a lot, especially when considering the pool of subjects comes from a small town. Certainly gives new meaning to Dr. Brenner's nickname, Papa.
They'd pay a couple $100 to people like my sister, give them drugs, psychedelics, LSD mostly, and then they'd strip her naked and put her in these isolation tanks.
After Terry became pregnant, Dr. Brenner must have had her under surveillance and maybe even had some control over her medical care. She suffered from complications late into her pregnancy and was rushed to the local hospital where she was given an emergency C-section. While fading out of consciousness, Dr. Brenner took Terry's baby away and used his government connections and power to make it appear as though Terry had a miscarriage. Even Terry's sister, Becky, believed this. However, Terry knew better and would never give up on trying to get her daughter back. In 1974, the New York Times released a detailed story about everything that had occurred during MKUltra. As you can imagine, this was shocking to most people. It was likely because of this that Terry was able to go public and try to sue Hawkins' lab for taking her daughter away from her. But none of this stopped Dr. Brenner or his program. It only became more secrets. Hawkins' lab was labeled as the Department of Energy, and the kids that were being studied were kept deep within the lab, cutting them off from any exposure to common civilians. Even after Terry lost the lawsuit, and even though her own sister did not believe her, she would never stop trying to get her daughter back. That same year, Terry took matters into her own hands. Armed with a handgun, she snuck into Hawkins' lab, but quickly got discovered by a security guard who she immediately shot and killed. She somehow made it all the way to the part of the lab where Eleven was being kept, found a door with a rainbow on it, and broke in. She managed to find Eleven, who would have been about 3 years old by this time, but this is where Terry's plan fell short. She was grabbed by security and dragged into a room where she was given electroshock therapy at 450 volts, enough to completely scramble a person's brain. Dr. Brenner would later justify this, claiming she wasn't well and that she had killed people. That may technically be true, but at the end of the day, Terry posed a threat to his operation, and this was the most effective way, apart from killing her, to permanently keep her quiet. However, this one moment of face-to-face connection with her mother would be ingrained in Eleven's memory for years to come, and play an important part in who she would become. Eleven would spend the formative years of her life as nothing more than a test subject with the other children who also have special abilities in Hawkins' lab. Eleven and the others would be stripped of anything that might give them a unique personality or identity. The tattooed number 11 on her forearm indicated that she was the 11th child brought into the program. Eleven and the others would have their heads shaved and be forced to wear uniform hospital gowns in place of individual clothing. She would be kept in a room that resembled more of a prison cell than a child's bedroom. Dr. Brenner would oversee every aspect of Eleven's life, and while there would be other doctors, lab technicians, and lab employees involved with Eleven, Dr. Brenner would serve as her primary caretaker, insisting that the children call him Papa. Her daily routine would consist of getting up, spending time in the Rainbow Room, a sort of playroom equipped with games and toys, and then undergoing a series of tests. Eleven and the other children would exhibit abilities such as telekinesis, astral projection, the ability to enter a person's mind, the ability to locate people mentally, and channel voices or sounds through radio equipment. While there's not an exact explanation for what part of the brain causes these powers to work, the use of their abilities causes bleeding from the nose and other parts of the face, such as the eyes or ears, and it sometimes leaves them depleted of energy depending on how much effort is applied. At some point in the midst of this, one of Eleven's fellow test subjects, number 8, escaped Hawkins' lab. This must have been between 1974 and 1979. 8 was playing with 11 when Terry broke in, but was gone by 1979 when an orderly mentions 8 to 11 in the past tense. It seems this caused Dr. Brenner to increase security and move the children to the basement of the lab. This would make the idea of leaving seem unfathomable to 11 and her fellow test subjects, not to mention they would have no idea what's out in the real world. But despite all of that, in 1979, the concept of leaving the Hawkins lab would become a very real possibility for 11. Though 11 was in the middle of the other children in terms of age, she was considered the weakest, and was often singled out by the others with bullying. She struggled with her abilities, and as a result, the children would laugh at her. In one test, on September 4th, 1979, the kids were tested on how much of this lighting fixture they could illuminate using their minds. While others were able to demonstrate great control over the lights, 11 was barely able to illuminate a single bulb, causing jeers from the others. Rather than intervene on the bullying, like a normal adult supervising kids, Brenner tried to use it as motivation for her.
They're laughing. At you. They think you're weak. Show them 11. Show them.
He may have intended to encourage 11 to harness her emotions and activate more power, but he adamantly contradicts himself by saying that they must never let emotion drive their powers.
If you allow anger or emotion to invade your thoughts, you will fail.
Much like Charlie McGee from Firestarter, they were being taught to contain their emotions and control their powers. However, unlike Charlie's parents, who were teaching her out of love so that she didn't lose control, Dr. Brenner teaches out of fear of losing control over them. This has happened once before. To 11's knowledge, the oldest child is number 2, and from what Dr. Brenner has told them, 1 never existed. This is not true, however. Henry Creel, who had murdered his family in 1959, was the first child in the program, and he grew to defy Dr. Brenner by channeling his angry emotions, making his powers surge out of control. Brenner was forced to nerf his first subject using a device that would scramble the signals in Henry's brain called Soteria. Henry, who is now essentially a lab employee and caretaker for the kids, noticed 11's struggles to fit in and found them relatable. He formed a plan to use 11 to aid his own escape from Hawkins' lab.
As much as I love Eggo waffles, I do not recommend having your entire diet revolve around them. So let me tell you about today's video sponsor, Factor. The thing I love about Factor is that it's equally convenient as just heating up a waffle, but Factor meals have all the flavor and nutrition of a delicious home-cooked meal. No weird ingredients, no guessing what's in it, just fresh meals ready in 2 minutes in your microwave. And like the cast list of Stranger Things every single season, now Factor's menu just got bigger. Choose from 80+ rotating meals with the new Asian and Mediterranean flavors, and even more high-protein options like salmon, turkey, and shredded beef. You can even swap proteins for free. I pretty much always order the Protein Plus meals because I gotta get my protein so that I can get strong for my fight against the Eddie Munson ops. Every meal is balanced and portioned, made without refined seed oils or sugars. So even when everything around you feels chaotic, what you eat doesn't have to be. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code CZFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code CZFB50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase.
In September of 1979, an 8-year-old 11 struggled with the peg game in the Rainbow Room during her free time. Henry took the opportunity to talk to her and began manipulating her, avoiding the surveillance cameras as he did so. He convinces her that he once knew number 1, while planting seeds of doubt about Dr. Brenner.
Sometimes, Papa doesn't tell the truth.
In defiance of the control that Dr. Brenner has tried to maintain, he tells her that he saw 1 reach great potential with his powers by thinking of a memory that made him sad but also angry, and even suggests that 11 use the faint memory of her mother coming to get her and being taken away. Soon after, 11 and the others are tested by playing the circle game, which I always thought was the game where you trick someone into looking at your fingers making a circle below your waist so you could slug them in the arm, but apparently it's not that circle game. 2, who is considered the most powerful, is put inside a chalk circle while another child stands in a circle opposite him. Both are blindfolded and the goal is to stay in your circle the longest. Using Henry's advice, 11 is able to surprise everyone by throwing 2 out of his circle and into the two-way mirror behind him. However, instead of impressing the other kids or gaining their respect, a humiliated 2 vows to make her pay. 2 and several of the other children are able to get 11 alone in the Rainbow Room, and for reasons unknown, these surveillance cameras are not functioning. They take turns throwing 11 around, a cacophony of air yeeting, if you will, sending her flying into a wall and giving her a concussion. Based on Dr. Brenner's display of complacency with bullying, it would seem like he may not care that this took place, but 2 warns her that if she tells Papa, he and the other kids will kill her. Surprisingly, Dr. Brenner is aware that something happened when 11 is discovered with concussion. She refuses to tell him the truth, so he makes 2 suffer the consequences, putting him in a shock collar and repeatedly shocking him with increasing voltage, trying to force him to admit what he did to 11. It's interesting how shock therapy is the preferred method of punishment for the character who represents Dr. Frankenstein. This punishment lands 2 in the hospital wing, unconscious. 11 and the other children are traumatized by witnessing this, so Henry utilizes this in his plan to villainize Brenner in Elle's mind. On September 8th, 1979, as 11 is playing in the Rainbow Room, keenly aware and afraid of what the other older children might do to her, Henry comes to the rescue, inviting her to play chess. Avoiding any indication that they're communicating in front of the security cameras, he convinces 11 that Dr. Brenner has a secret plan to have the other children kill her, and that escaping the lab is her only chance at survival. He has her sneak down to a boiler room where he shows her a tunnel to escape to the surrounding neighborhood, but not before appealing to her good nature and empathy by convincing her he can't come with her because of the tracking device in the Soteria chip planted in his head. 11 falls for his trick and uses her telekinesis to remove the device. However, they're both discovered by security and run for it. But with Henry's powers no longer being suppressed, he was able to use them to kill the men in their way, before he shows 11 his 001 tattoo, revealing that he is actually 1. He tells her to wait in a closet while he finds a way out, but when 11 hears the alarm sound, she steps out to look for him. What she finds instead is the traumatic aftermath of a horrific massacre, with the other children's lifeless bodies strewn all over the lab. She discovers Henry in the Rainbow Room, brutally antagonizing too. This kid is just really having a bad week. He just got out of the hospital wing, and now it's already over for him. Although 11 is not a fan of 2 for obvious reasons, she proves that she is nowhere near as cruel as Henry is. She begins to cry, but Henry simply cannot fathom her empathy.
Why do you cry for them, 11? After everything they did to you? You think you need them, but you don't.
Henry believes that if he can explain his entire origin story, 11 will see their similarities and take his side, but 11 proves to be nothing like him, expressing hurt and betrayal at Henry's manipulation.
You tricked me.
Tricked you? No, I saved you.
When Henry asks her to help him destroy the world, she shocks him by saying no and surprise attacking him. The 2 most promising subjects the lab has ever produced square off in a life or death version of the Circle game. At first, 11 focuses on memories that spark her anger, as Henry had previously suggested, but she's not able to overpower him. He lifts her in the air, but just before he's going to execute her, she thinks back to maybe her only happy memory, of her mother giving birth to her, naming her Jane, and saying I love you. And this time, fueled by love, she's able to overpower Henry with such force that she accidentally opens a gate into another dimension, and sends Henry burning up into it. By this time, Dr. Brenner comes into the Rainbow Room, having no idea what had occurred and only seeing a panting, worked up 11 amidst all of the carnage, and asks her,
What have you done?
And these words would haunt her for the rest of her life. Eventually, the security footage revealed what really happens, to Dr. Brenner's shock and horror. But because 11 had used so much of her strength, once the adrenaline stopped pumping, she collapsed unconscious. The whole experience was so traumatic that her brain repressed the entire thing, apparently to the point that 11 doesn't even remember the other children ever existing. Dr. Brenner would later explain to 11 that she lost her memories because the emotional trauma, combined with overusing her powers, caused neural pathways to be blocked in her brain. She temporarily loses much of her ability to speak, seeming to suffer something similar to language aphasia. This actually fits in nicely with Dr. Brenner's explanation. Johns Hopkins Medicine defines aphasia as a language disorder caused by damage in a specific area of the brain that controls language expression and comprehension. So it's implied that seeing her dead classmates is what triggered that and her dissociative amnesia. This condition is commonly referred to as repressed memory. 11 represses the existence of Henry, 8, and most everything that happened before she woke up in the hospital.
Our brains have a defense mechanism in place to protect it from bad memories, from trauma. You buried these memories long ago.
There are several different types of memory loss, and it's still an area that scientists are trying to learn more about. When it comes to repressed memory, there is a debate among research psychologists over the idea that a memory can be repressed and then recovered years later. Many would suggest that those who experience long-term memory loss never actually recover those memories through therapy, but rather, they essentially create new false memories. It's likely that most examples of dissociative amnesia as a result of trauma that you see in the movies are exactly that, just in the movies. But Stranger Things is not a movie, it's a show. They almost got it right, because whenever she supposedly recovers memories, it's always her being shown past events through telepathic communication or surveillance footage, at which point she may be creating new but similar false memories. However, there are a couple examples of memories that seem to surface from the depths of her mind, which we'll get to. She'd spend the next 5 years being Dr. Brenner's only test subject and his main focus, with all of her classmates either dead, escaped, or banished to another realm. During this time, a number of in-depth experiments are performed, including scanning her brain as she crushes a can of Coke, and even taking readings on her as she's expected to kill a cat, which she refuses to do. Even though she was raised almost entirely by Brenner, she still seems to have an inherent set of morals that she abides by. She's punished for her failure to comply and locked in a closet where she's overcome with feelings of claustrophobia. Dr. Brenner learned that 11's ability to astral project would be strongest in a sensory deprivation tank, or bath as he would call it, and he used her to spy on members of the Soviet Union who she was capable of locating with just a photograph. In the midst of this, he remained well aware that Henry was possibly still alive in this other dimension and probably wanted to recoup his greatest investment. On November 6th, 1983, during her astral projection, 11 unintentionally discovers a strange and terrifying creature, later referred to as a Demogorgon. Dr. Brenner sees this as an opportunity to possibly find Henry and instructs Eleven to make contact with this creature. This plan immediately backfires when the Demogorgon sees Eleven. Normally, when spying on a subject using astral projection, the person has no idea that she's watching, so this is the first example of a subject being able to detect her. Her frenzy of fear and panic causes her to lose control of her powers, much like Charlie McGee in Firestarter. But instead of setting things on fire, or causing a huge explosion, or these fire asteroids, Eleven's interaction with the Demogorgon inadvertently opens a gate into the alternate dimension, which becomes known as the Upside Down. From the moment she does this, absolute chaos breaks out in Hawkins' lab as the creature breaches the barrier, killing everyone in its path and eventually escaping into the town of Hawkins itself to hunt for new prey. But under the blanket of this chaos, and most likely just in a panic herself, Eleven also escapes captivity, most likely using the tunnels that Henry showed her previously. She may not have consciously remembered Henry, but the tunnels are definitely how she leaves the lab, because the middle school science teacher, Mr. Clark, would eventually discover a shred of her hospital gown stuck to the edge of the drainage system. For the first time ever, she would get a taste of fresh air and experience the outside world. While there were instances where Eleven was asked to astral project to look for people beyond the walls of the lab, this would be her first time physically setting foot in nature, leaving her scared and confused like a horror fan in the romance section. On November 7th, 1983, she comes across a diner called Benny's Burgers and sneaks in through the back looking for food. She tries to stuff down as many fries as she can before Benny returns to the kitchen. Although I would probably do the same thing if I was in her situation, stealing food is technically a crime. Through making this video, I noticed that Eleven commits a lot of crimes, and I decided to keep track of the laws she breaks to log it all on her criminal record. When Benny discovers her stealing food, he's initially alarmed and yells at her, but after catching her, realizes that she's no common thief. She could have easily killed Benny or tossed him aside, but that's not what she does. I think it says a lot about her character. She only harms those who are a danger to others. I know I just got done calling her a criminal, but she's actually a pretty good person, all things considered. Benny gives her a t-shirt, a burger, and attempts to get her name and where she came from, but Eleven barely speaks to him. He attempts to call social services, but just as Dr. Brenner had local hospitals bugged and watched when Eleven's mom went into labor, he seems to have control over the phone lines as well. The lab intercepts the call and comes out to Benny's restaurant instead. Elle watches from the kitchen as a woman from the lab shoots down Benny, causing her to get scared and run out the back door, taking down 2 agents on her way. She had run into the woods just as a storm approached. Having spent her whole life in the basement of a lab without windows, this would be a lot to comprehend, but she wouldn't be alone for long. Later that night, middle school nerds Mike Wheeler, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair are looking for their missing friend, Will Byers, when they come across Eleven in the woods. Mike immediately feels empathy for her, and they bring her back to his house. Somehow they all seem to realize that she's a girl. I don't know about you, but it took me a solid 2 hours to have that realization when I was watching the show, and I know I'm not the only one. Apparently, the young actress, Millie Bobby Brown, was mistaken for a boy so many times that she just stopped correcting people and told them that her name was John. Personally, I would have gone with Bobby. Not only is that her middle name, but when people saw her putting on makeup, they would have said, "That boy ain't right." While Dustin and Lucas feel apprehensive about Eleven, and Lucas makes it known that trying to help her is only distracting from finding their missing friend, Mike feels drawn to help her. He sees her arm tattoo and learns that she goes by Eleven. He asks if she'd be okay with being called Elle for short, and she agrees. To avoid getting in trouble for sneaking out during curfew, Mike hatches a plan to hide Eleven in the basement for the night, lending her some of his clothes and getting her set up in a blanket fort with the intention of having her ring the doorbell in the morning so his mom can help her. However, Eleven reflects on what happened to Benny when he tried to help her and refuses to allow Mike to put himself and his family in danger. Once again, she displays selflessness, despite being used as a tool of war her whole life. The next morning, Mike secretly gives Eleven some Eggo waffles that he was able to smuggle into the basement for nourishment. Eleven's diet in Hawkins' lab was never revealed, but considering that they didn't allow the children to have any sort of pleasure that wasn't directly related to enhancing their abilities, I'd imagine it was nothing special. In fact, when we first see her eat the fries, she almost seems unsure if it's food or not. It makes sense that an Eggo waffle would be earth-shattering to Eleven, and it immediately becomes her favorite thing to eat. And who can blame her? Mike ditches school to sneak back home and stay with Eleven for the day. While showing her around his house, she sees a photo with Will in it and points to him, making Mike believe that she might know where he is. Before she can elaborate, Mike's mom comes home and he hides Eleven in the closet, giving her flashbacks to the time that she was locked in the closet as punishment at the lab. After school, Dustin and Lucas come over, and the boys learn about her special powers when Eleven slams the door to prevent Lucas from telling Mike's mom about her.
No.
They still don't know where she came from, and she's barely communicating with words, but they agree, against Lucas's wishes, to let her join what they call the Party, which is basically their Dungeons and Dragons group. Mike and Dustin both have hope that Eleven's superpowers will help them find Will, but Lucas is not convinced. Eleven demonstrates that Will has been taken by the monster into the other dimension, but these concepts are difficult to explain when you're only able to say like one word at a time. She's able to use their Dungeons and Dragons board to get the point across, taking Will's character, flipping the board over, and placing him on it, with the Demogorgon looming nearby. The boys figure out what she means, and the next day, they gather materials to search for him after school in what they call Operation Mirkwood. Eleven notices that Mike has a bruise, which he must have gotten at school, and although he tries to lie about it at first, they both end up bonding over their mutual experience of being bullied.
Mike, I understand.
Elle is able to use her tracking ability to lead them to Will's house. Although Eleven can sense that Will is hiding in the Upside Down, the boys cannot see this, and she has a hard time effectively communicating that to them. They're interrupted by police sirens and follow them to the quarry, where they witness what appears to be Will's body being fished out of the water. In an attempt to cover up the existence of the Upside Down, the Hawkins lab created this dummy in order to stage this whole scene where Will's body is found. This makes Mike think that Eleven lied to him, and when they're alone, he explodes on her.
Our friends tell each other the truth, and they definitely don't lie to each other.
These words become sort of a code that the kids live by. Friends don't lie. Never having had a friend before, Eleven is especially hurt by these accusations, but she's able to prove she wasn't lying by using some extension of her ability to channel Will's voice over Mike's walkie-talkie. The following day, Mike rallies the boys, but they're hesitant to believe him, and Eleven isn't able to channel Will's voice as clearly as the day before. Deciding they need a stronger radio, they make a plan to sneak Eleven into their school's AV club. So they invade the closet of Mike's sister, Nancy, finding a dress and blonde wig. They go to the school, but before getting to the AV club, Mr. Clark ushers them into a school assembly and memorial for Will, where Eleven witnesses some of the boys bullying Mike firsthand. Perhaps triggered by her own experience with bullying, buried within her subconscious, she retaliates by telekinetically squeezing the boy's bladder, making him pee his own pants. Is there any better form of revenge? Imagine constantly being afraid that you'll pee yourself. After this, they're able to get into the AV room and hear Will trying to communicate cross-dimension to his mother, but Eleven's channeling of signals from the Upside Down seems to overload the ham radio, and it catches fire. You just know the show's creators were literally dying to have Eleven literally be a Firestarter for a minute. This also exhausts her powers, leaving her with a nosebleed and unable to do much of anything. Mike shows concern for her, becoming the first person to care about the toll that using her powers has on her body. Back in the basement, while trying to figure out how to get Will, Eleven barely musters the strength to drop a clue for them.
Upside down.
However, she doesn't exactly know how to get there. Eventually, after the boys talk to their science teacher, they decide that there should theoretically be a gate to the Upside Down, and Dustin comes to realize that the magnetic field of the gate is altering the pull of their compasses, so they all head in that direction. However, Eleven covertly altered their direction every time they got close to the lab out of concern for their safety by using telekinesis to manipulate the needle of the compass. She wants to help, but she knows the danger that lies in there. Plus, she's not going back to where she spent her life in captivity. But after noticing how much her nose is bleeding, Lucas exposes her for sabotaging the plan. This causes a huge fight between Mike and Lucas, but when Lucas calls Eleven the monster, she snaps. As she had been warned by Dr. Brenner, Eleven is overcome with emotion, and in trying to separate the two, sends Lucas flying way too hard and hitting his head against a wall. This even gets Mike to turn on her.
What's wrong with you?
Eleven feels tremendous guilt for both what she did to Lucas and for opening the gate in the first place. She believes that she is the monster, and in a whirlwind of self-loathing, runs away from the boys, determined to survive on her own. It's not long before Eleven gets hungry again, and on the morning of November 13th, she steals some Eggos from the local Bradley's Big Buy, shattering the glass doors on her way out, and drawing a lot of attention and police presence to where she's been. It may just be waffles, but it is shoplifting, and it's going on her criminal record. I can't imagine frozen Eggos are very good, but after years of lab food, she's not a picky eater. She relieves her hunger in the woods, not far away from where Mike and Dustin get jumped by the bullies, seeking to relieve their own hunger for revenge. PP Boy forces Mike to jump off the side of the cliff into the quarry, which would likely be to his death, but Eleven is there just in time to save him and make the bullies pay. Despite playing the hero, she still blames herself for everything going on in Hawkins.
The gate. I opened it. I'm the monster.
No, Elle, you're not the monster. You saved me. Do you understand? You saved me.
You saved me!
She gets cleaned up back at Mike's, asking him if she's still pretty without the wig, which he believes she is, even though she looks like a little boy with cancer. But before Mike can slide in for what surely would have been an awkward first kiss, Dustin barges in with radio intel from Lucas. They also notice the house being surrounded by strange vans, forcing them to flee on bikes, ET style. 11 and Papa briefly make eye contact before her departure. It wouldn't have been difficult for her to take him out right then and there, however, she lets him live. Although he was cruel to her, she seems to have developed some kind of Stockholm syndrome towards Brenner. Perhaps it is because he conditioned the kids to see him as a father, or perhaps it's because 11 can't shake the idea that she's the monster, and he is merely the mad scientist who created her with good intentions. This strange relationship with Brenner is something that would continue to evolve throughout her story. The party finds themselves surrounded, and when all hope seems lost, 11 tosses one of the vans into the air, clearing the path for their escape. This is by far the largest object she's levitated to this point, and she does so out of love and appreciation for her friends, to protect them. She may not understand it yet, but she's found a way to use her power in a way that Henry or Dr. Brenner never could. They catch their breath at the junkyard, where Lucas, who discovered some of the sinister intentions of the Hawkins lab on his own, apologizes for how he treated 11, and she apologizes to him in her own way.
Friends don't lie.
They spend the day hiding out in an abandoned school bus, but eventually agents with guns come for them, and it appears they're about to be discovered when Police Chief Jim Hopper comes to their rescue by knocking out the government agent. Hopper and Will's mom, Joyce Byers, have found out all about 11 and joined forces with them with the hope that 11 can help them find Will. Will's brother, Jonathan, is also there with Nancy.
Is that my dress?
11 attempts to find Will and Nancy's missing friend Barbara, but her ability seems limited without the aid of his sensory deprivation tank, so they build one in a kiddie pool filled with salt at the Hawkins Middle School. Joyce and Hopper may be the first adults that 11 encounters who seem to comprehend that she's just a kid, and a kid who's been through a lot. While Joyce needs 11 to find her son, she offers her motherly support, and relays how much her help means to her. It would be the first time since 11 was a toddler that she had received anything resembling parental care, and this would stick with her, as Joyce and Hopper would become respective mother and father figures in the long term. With the aid of the tank, 11 is able to astral project and first finds that she's too late to save Brab, also known as Barb, but then she does discover Will, barely alive in the upside down version of his fort, Castle Byers. As Joyce and Hopper leave for the lab to go through the gate and look for Will, Mike and Elle are left alone while Lucas and Dustin are raiding the lunchroom. He shares his fantasy about what will happen when all of this is over, seeming to believe that his family will just take her in and they can go to the snowball dance together in the winter. Unable to explain his feelings for her, he just kisses her, and she seems to understand by giving him a low-key smile. Despite their very different upbringings, the two are learning to communicate abstract concepts to each other. 11 used the game board to demonstrate the upside down, and Mike uses a first kiss to demonstrate romance as opposed to platonic friendship. But their moment is cut short when Dr. Brenner and the others from the Hawkins lab arrive at the middle school to get 11. Now completely dedicated to protecting her friends, she kills the men and the woman who shot Benny by using her powers to squeeze their brains until their eyes hemorrhage and bleed out. Something she may have subconsciously picked up from Henry, even if she doesn't remember Henry himself. But using this much of her power makes her collapse, her so-called battery completely drained. Dr. Brenner tries to take 11, telling her that he can make her better again. But the Demogorgon, drawn in by the smell of blood, finds a temporary gate directly into the school. It attacks Brenner, allowing the boys to get to 11 and retreat into the science classroom where they attempt to hold off the Demogorgon with Lucas's wrist rocket, which essentially does nothing. But it buys them enough time for 11 to snap back into action. We can see her eyes turn red from the blood loss that occurs when she uses the most of her abilities, and she holds back Mike when he tries to stop her. Realizing there is only one way to protect him, she turns back and tells Mike goodbye. With one final burst of power, she sends the Demogorgon back into the Upside Down. Just like what she did with Henry, but this time, the Demogorgon takes her with it. She seems to know this will happen, and finds herself banished, as her arch-rival Vecna once was. She eventually finds a way back into the right side up through the gate that the Demogorgon used to come into the school not long before. She's able to sneak out undetected, and goes back to Mike's house to find his family being briefed by Hawkins lab personnel on how to alert them if she were to ever appear again. Despite her young age, she knows it's not safe for her to be around Mike, and wants to do what's best for him. She runs into the woods and manages to survive for nearly 2 months, which is very impressive considering that she lived most of her life in a laboratory. Chief Hopper still suspects that she's out there somewhere and starts secretly leaving food and waffles in a box in the woods. Eventually, 11 gains enough trust to come into contact with him. He fixes up a remote cabin that he owns and tells her that this is her new home. He stays with 11 and secretly takes care of her, taking on the role of the father that she never had. He teaches her a new word every day, trying to make up for her lost years of schooling. He also teaches various sayings that he believes will help her out in the real world, and perhaps as a result of him being in charge of her wardrobe, she even starts to dress like him. While his intentions are well-meaning, 11 finds herself essentially confined once again. She's not allowed to see her friends or leave the cabin for her safety. She does keep an eye on Mike using her astral projection, and she can see that he tries to reach her every day, keeping track of how many days she's been gone. But when Hawkins is threatened again that fall, 11 is forced to risk her own safety to protect those she cares about. October 31st, 1984, Eleven approaches Hopper with a sheet over her head, giving the argument that if she went to physically see her friends for Halloween, nobody would know that it was her. Apart from being another nod to E.T., this demonstrates that Eleven had been watching television and astral projecting enough to be familiar with Halloween. Hopper thinks it's too risky, but offers her a compromise of watching scary movies and eating Halloween candy together instead. But when Hopper doesn't return at the agreed upon time that night, Eleven is stuck watching Frankenstein on her own. It appears that the significance is not lost on her. She likely relates to Frankenstein's monster as someone who is created by a self-important scientist, has no real place in society, and keeps hurting those around him. Hopper communicates to Eleven via Morse code that he'll be back late, which makes her angry and rebellious. She takes the opportunity to move the TV to her bedroom in order to better astral project to see Mike. She sees he's having a bad day and wishes she could help. When Hopper finally arrives and offers her candy, she ignores him, partly out of anger and partly because her focus is now on Mike. The next morning, he bribes her with a pile of Eggo waffles covered in whipped cream and candy and confronts her about her astral projecting, telling her that she'll see Mike soon. Eleven thinks he's lying and uses Mike's mantra against him, telling him friends don't lie, before storming off and slamming the door. It feels like a typical teen girl outburst over a boy, which helps humanize a very atypical character. So in typical 80s teen movie fashion, when Hopper leaves for the day, she sneaks out to find Mike and get a look at him, even if she knows she can't make contact, but is put off when she sees him talking to a new girl named Max Mayfield, giving her a new teenage emotion to add to her arsenal: jealousy. That night, when Eleven gets home, Hopper is angry with her for sneaking out and grounds her, telling her no more TV. Considering that this is really Eleven's only way to access the outside world, she gets very upset and it escalates into a fight. She even compares Hopper to Dr. Brenner, but his stubbornness causes her to scream and break all the windows in the house. Another example of anger, making it difficult to control her powers. It's exactly what Dr. Brenner feared. She locks herself in her room and cries. Despite what she said during the tantrum, there is a clear difference in parenting style between Brenner and Hopper. Both are strict with her, but Hopper's parenting comes from a place of love, which ironically brings out Eleven's anger and thus her powers. However, she would soon discover even greater power when she learns to channel her emotions in a more positive manner, which is something she would have to learn over the next few days. The following morning, after doing his best to board up the windows, Hopper tells her to clean the place up. As she's sweeping up the glass, she discovers a hidden cellar door and investigates what's down there out of curiosity, finding boxes and files on Hawkins' lab. Previously, Hopper had told her that her mother was dead, but she discovered that that wasn't true. Feeling she has no place in Hawkins, she leaves to find her mother. She hitchhikes with a kind truck driver who takes her to Terry Ives' house, where she meets her Aunt Becky, who until now did not believe that Eleven, or Jane as her mother called her, survived childbirth. She discovers that her mom has been left in a catatonic state by Brenner's so-called treatments. Her Aunt Becky explains to her that she's not in any pain, but she's stuck in sort of a dream.
She won't get better, will she?
They don't think so, no. But she's not in any pain. She's just stuck, they think. Like in a dream. A long dream.
A good dream. I hope so.
As Aunt Becky shows off the nursery that Terry insisted on keeping for her, she offers to let her stay and call this her new home, likely feeling guilty about never looking for her niece over the last 13 years. Before giving an answer, Eleven notices the lights flickering and realizes it's her mom using the little bit of power she has to try to communicate with her. Realizing she might be able to talk to her in the realm of astral projection, she blindfolds herself and asks Becky to turn on the television so she can attempt to make contact. Terry pulls her into her own mind, where she shows everything that happened from the moment she gave birth up until when Dr. Brenner ordered to have her brain fried. In this series of images, Eleven sees that when her mom came to save her, there was another girl with her in the rainbow room. She is determined to learn who this girl is and what happened to her, so Becky shares some files that Terry kept on the other families whose kids might have been taken by MKUltra. One photo looks familiar, so Eleven tries to find her with her sensory location ability. Eventually she does, but when she goes to tell Aunt Becky, she hears her on the phone trying to reach Hopper, which is a potential danger. Less because she's supposed to be grounded, and more because Hawkins' lab may be listening in to telephone calls. This discovery also makes it clear that Becky isn't prepared to really take care of Eleven. The offer to live with her may not have been serious, or Becky might be having second thoughts about if she can manage this. Either way, Eleven comes to the conclusion that this isn't home either, and the runaway arc continues. She steals some money from Becky's purse, so we can add larceny to her criminal record, and she buys a bus ticket to find AIDS. This journey takes her to Chicago, which is Eleven's first time encountering a big city. When she looks at the Sears Tower, she gets a look in her eye that makes me think she's daydreaming about all the voices she could channel with those huge radio antennae. She discovers that 8 now goes by Kali Prasad. Kali has abilities more similar to that of Henry. She can make people see things that aren't really there.
I can make people see or not see whatever I choose.
She first comes across Kali's very alternative group of friends who do their best to intimidate Elle, feeling threatened that someone from the outside has found them. However, Kali immediately bonds with Eleven after discovering their matching tattoos and pulls her outside onto the roof so that they can catch up. Eleven tells Kali everything, or at least as much as she can communicate with her limited conversational ability, and it is immediately evident that Elle has no memory of any of their mutual time spent in Hawkins. Kali steps into the role of big sister to Eleven, offering her unique experience having been out in the real world for much longer. It's easy to see why Eleven is so quick to cling on to her. Her character goal throughout season 2 of Stranger Things is to find where she belongs, and after leaving her surrogate father, her mom, and her aunt, maybe a big sister is just what she needs to find that sense of belonging. On top of that, Kali warns her that while Hopper's intentions may be well-meaning, he'll never be able to protect her from the apparent menace organization that is the Hawkins lab, claiming that he can never understand them.
We will always be monsters to them, do you understand?
She assures her that her powers make her special, referring to them as a gift. She lets Eleven stay in an extra bed in her loft and tells her that for the first time, she feels whole, like something has been missing until her arrival. When Kali goes downstairs and rejoins her friends, she reveals that Eleven's special gift could be useful to them. It seems like she may be more interested in exploiting Elle for her abilities at first, because 8 has a plan that would make her new sister question just what type of person she really is. As Eleven falls asleep that evening, she astral projects to check on Hopper and hears a message that he left for her back at the cabin, which he hasn't been able to return to yet. He apologizes for their fight and promises to make things right again, leaving her in a place of a lot of confusion. The next day, Kali explains that she and her group of freaks have been running an operation to track down the former employees of the Hawkins lab who caused her harm. Axel senses her visible uneasiness about this, but Eleven sets the record straight.
I'm a fighter. I've killed.
This is technically true, but in the past, Eleven is only killed as an act of defense. That's why I haven't added murder to her criminal record. Kali, just like Henry before her, explains to Eleven that she has an anger within her, and if she doesn't find a way to let it out, it will fester. She takes her outside to practice, challenging her to move a train car, all while trying to fuel her with ideas of the bad men who took her mother, her home, and her old life away from her. Eleven, now coursing with anger and adrenaline, looks over the badges of the former Hawkins employees that they've collected. She most likely doesn't recognize most of them because she has no memories of her own prior to Henry's massacre. But thanks to the images her mother shared with her, she does recognize one.
He hurt Mama.
His name is Ray Carroll, and he did more than hurt your mother.
Eleven agrees to go kill Ray, and thanks to her sensory location ability, they're finally able to find it. But before they leave, Eleven truly becomes part of this strange new family with a full-on goth makeover from Kali.
Bitchin'.
Indeed. On the way, they stop at a gas station for supplies, taking advantage of Kali's powers to distract the attendant and steal whatever they need. Before they can escape, the attendant comes out and catches them, and he threatens them with a gun. The moment serves as kind of an unintentional initiation for Eleven, who protects her new friends by sending the man flying into the coolers with her TK. The journey with 8 so far resembles what someone might go through when joining a gang. First, Eleven must prove herself, then she's marked as a member of the gang, and now her initiation. It's all very fitting, considering that Eleven first ran away as retaliation against her parent figure, who is a cop. Imagine Hopper's reaction to learning that she had joined a gang. Also, although we don't see it here, 8 has a gun with her during this, so that's armed robbery. And it wouldn't be long before we can add breaking and entering. They arrive at Ray Carroll's apartments later that night and barge in with masks. Together, Kali and Eleven confront him, and after revealing who they are, he panics and offers to take them to Dr. Brenner, who is apparently still alive. Eleven must have seen Star Wars on TV while locked in her cabin that year because she basically starts to force choke him. That is, until the other thugs discover that Ray's 2 young daughters are in the other room and have called the police. After discovering he's a parent, Eleven releases him. Her journey this past week has showed her that the reason she's an outcast is because her mother was taken away from her. She's not about to inflict the same fate on 2 innocent kids. She does not want to be the monster. When she freezes up, Kali pulls the gun out to finish him off herself, but Eleven yanks the weapon from her hand. As the police approach, the gang is forced to book it, with Ray Carroll being left alive. Kali gives her a firm warning on the ride back.
If you wanted to show mercy, that is your choice. But don't you ever take away mine.
Upon getting back, they discuss their past at the lab, and Kali makes Eleven see an illusory version of Dr. Brenner, basically encouraging her to help the gang go after him. Otherwise, her rage will continue to fester. When Eleven screams for Kali to get out of her head, she tells her that this place isn't a prison and she can leave whenever she wants. As Kali leaves her to think, she revisits memories of Mike and Hopper and astral projects to find them, but discovers that they're both in danger at the Hawkins lab. Her journey into the void is interrupted though, as a SWAT team breaks into the building and sends Eleven, Kali, and the others to flee. Kali uses her gift to hide them, and once they're outside, creates the illusion of a giant wall in order to give them time to escape. As the group climbs into the van to make their getaway, Eleven makes her decision and tells Kali that she cannot join them because her friends in Hawkins need her help. Unlike Kali and Henry, 11 decides that her powers should be used for protecting those she loves instead of getting revenge.
There's nothing for you back there. They cannot save you, Jane.
No, but I can save them.
11 uses the same abilities that she used to find Kali to figure out where Hopper, Mike, and the rest of her friends are at the home of the Byers family. As she approaches, she finds a Demogorgon-like creature on all fours threatening them from the perimeter, and she takes it out by smashing it through the window before shocking everyone by walking in and revealing her new goth look. She probably could have just knocked instead of just letting herself in, but hey, she's missing like 12 years of social skills. Also, why did she break Joyce's window when she could have just thrown the Demodog anywhere? That's property damage, and there's no way I'm leaving that off her record. The group devises a plan to send 11 back to the lab again to shut the gates, which should cut off the new villain, the Mind Flayer, from being able to control the Demodogs terrorizing the city. On the way there, she and Hopper make amends and talk things out, and he tells her all about how he once had a daughter who died. He tells her that he doesn't hate her new goth look, and 11 realizes he really is a genuine father figure who truly loves and cares for her. We never see the goth look again though. Hashtag stop goth erasure. Hopper tells her to save her energy, and he'll keep them covered with his gun until they reach the gates. Along the way, they discover a severely injured Dr. Owens. This is the current head scientist of the lab, although as far as we know, it's the first time the two have met. Despite how injured he is, he's shocked to see the legend he's likely heard so much about. Hopper strikes a deal to help him if he can promise that the lab personnel will set 11 free and allow her to have a normal life. No more trying to abduct or reclaim her. Owens agrees, and they make it to the gate. It's guarded by a horde of Demodogs, but thanks to a diversion created by their friends across town, Hopper and 11 make it to the elevator safely. This time, 11 uses Kali's advice and channels all of her anger, releasing so much telekinetic energy that she levitates in mid-air as she closes the gates to the Upside Down. The Mind Flayer, who lurks on the other side, rages as its access is cut off, and the Demodogs that threaten the town all fall dead on the spot. In the aftermath, Dr. Owens makes good on his promise, aware that 11 saved everyone, including him. He's also just a more humane person than Dr. Brenner ever was, so he arranges for 11 to get an entirely new identity and birth certificate as Jane Hopper, once again demonstrating the unparalleled power that the Hawkins lab has over the US government. Although Owens still suggests that 11 lay low, they're able to arrange a night out to take Mike up on an old promise. In December of 1984, they attend that year's snowball at Hawkins Middle School. From here on out, 11 is able to live some semblance of a normal life. Mike and friends are able to come visit and hang out, even if they don't know exactly who she really is. 11 and Mike officially become girlfriend and boyfriend, which mostly means making out. Naturally, Hopper absolutely hates this.
Hey! 3-inch minimum! Leave the door open 3 inches!
This portion of the timeline is a huge missed opportunity for Steve Harrington. He could have easily approached 11 about attending the Hawkins High School basketball games that spring and using her telekinesis to deflect the opponent's shots ever so slightly. And she probably would have agreed to do it too, given her extensive criminal record. As more time goes by without incidents, restrictions are eased, and 11 is able to attend a welcome home for Dustin as he returns home from summer camp on June 28, 1985. She even uses her telekinesis to bring some toys and gizmos to life. The next day, however, Mike becomes suddenly distant and tells 11 that his Nana is sick and he can't hang out. 11 correctly suspects that Mike is lying, not realizing that Hopper is the one behind it, trying to teach the kids about boundaries. But Mike has broken their cardinal rule: friends don't lie. 11 goes to Max, the girl that she was previously jealous of, for advice. They bond over boy issues, spending the day at the mall together, where 11 gets yet another new look. Her constantly evolving wardrobe illustrates her struggle to find her true place in the real world. But her style fluctuations were about to become the least of her problems. After grabbing ice cream together, 11 and Max exit the mall and find Mike and the boys by the bike racks, meaning that Mike was not visiting his sick grandmother, and 11 has had enough.
I dump your ass.
After breaking up with one of the few people she feels she can truly count on, 11 has mixed emotions, but Max takes her mind off things by coming to stay the night and playing a game where they spin a Coke bottle and have it land on names of different people in town. 11 then astral projects to see what those people are doing. The first person that the bottle lands on is Max's stepsister, Billy Hargrove, who she sees causing harm to a local lifeguard, Heather Holloway. Max and 11 are shocked, but Max doesn't want to believe that it's true. They go to Max's house the next day, and the bathtub is filled with bags of ice, which 11 finds alarming, but Max dismisses as Billy icing his muscles after a workout. But when 11 finds Heather's fanny pack and there's blood on her lifeguard whistle, the two girls go to the pool to see if Heather came in for work that day, to find out that she did not. They set up a sensory deprivation area using the showers in the locker room to block out noise, allowing 11 to locate Heather, who's in the bathtub, being pulled under by something as she pleads for help. They go straight to her house to help her, but to her surprise, find Billy and Heather having dinner with Heather's family. Max is satisfied since Heather seems to be okay, but 11, despite having never met Billy before, can tell that something is off. She spends the night again at Max's. Then, the next morning, Mike, Lucas, and Will call to inform them that the Mind Flayer has returned. They reconvene in the Wheelers' basement, and Will, who is previously infected or flayed by the Mind Flayer the autumn before, expresses belief that there's a new host, which they come to realize must be Billy. The group forms a plan that they call the sauna test. Knowing the Mind Flayer doesn't like heat, they lure Billy into the sauna at the pool that he works at and lock him in, cranking the heat all the way up and revealing that Billy's mind has indeed been flayed. His possession also seems to give him super strength, allowing him to escape and even overpower Elle's telekinesis to lock her in a chokehold, which she can't seem to get out of. At least not until Mike distracts him by whacking him in the head with a pole. As he turns his attention to Mike, he drops 11, giving her just enough energy to levitate and air yeet Billy through a brick wall. This was a close call for 11, the first battle since Henry that she wasn't able to win outright. The next day, they discover that Joyce Byers and Hopper have left town, leaving the kids on their own. They join forces with Nancy and Jonathan and go back to Heather Holloway's house, where they discover a crime scene like something out of Mindhunter, but learn that the Mind Flayer has likely flayed several people in town, including Heather's parents. Nancy wants to check on one of the flayed victims in the hospital, an elderly woman by the name of Mrs. Driscoll. However, the Mind Flayer realizes that the group is getting close. Several of the flayed townspeople are drawn to one spot and melted into sludge to form a giant physical body for the Mind Flayer called the elementary school cafeteria meat form. I mean, they don't call it that, but I do, and that's all that's important. As the meat monster goes after Nancy on an upper level of the hospital, the rest of the group waits in the lobby, unaware. 11 and Mike are still not on great terms, just working together out of necessity. But when a vending machine tries to scam Mike out of a Kit Kat bar, 11 helps him by giving it a jolt.
Thanks.
This is a small sign that the divide between them may be receding, but more importantly, Elle could have just lifted the one candy bar that Mike paid for. So stolen candy, that's going on her criminal record. As the two of them make amends, the group sees flickering lights, a telltale sign of danger from the Upside Down. They rush upstairs to find the cafeteria meat monster as it's just about to kill Nancy. A midsummer lunch lady's dream. Luckily for Nance, 11 bursts down the door faster than Chief Hopper would if he suspected Mike getting to second base, and she slams the creature from wall to wall before launching it out the window, where it turns back into sludge and retreats down the drain, obviously overmatched by 11's love for her friends. On July 4th, 1985, Independence Day in the USA, the group plans to do what they always do when Hawkins is in trouble. Use 11 to fight it. 11 locates Billy just sitting in his room, which seems like a trap, so they discuss what the best approach would be. 11 comes up with the idea to astral project into Billy's mind the way she did with her mom last year. But Mike is against this idea, arguing that her mom loved her and fearing what Billy might be able to do to her. While 11 appreciates that he still cares for her in a way that nobody else seems to, she assures him that Billy can't hurt her in the void. As she goes into Billy's mind, she learns a lot about his childhood, including one happy memory with his mother at the beach. This is significant, as it's one of the few happy memories that 11 sees. The rest mostly revolve around Billy's abusive dad. The other key piece of information she discovers is that the Mind Flayer initially trapped Billy at Brimborn Steel Walls. As she tries to leave Billy's mind, she discovers she can't, as the Mind Flayer has now infiltrated her mind, leaving her trapped. She sees herself in the cabin, but she's alone, and the MF communicates to her through Billy.
Don't you see? All this time, we've been building it. We've been building it for you, and now it's time to end it, and we are going to end you. And when you are gone, we are going to end your friends, and then we are going to end everyone.
He releases 11, who is now worried that the Mind Flayer knows their location, since Billy could see the cabin in her mind space. Before they know it, the cabin is surrounded by an even bigger amalgamation of mystery meat, and since Nancy's shotgun does little damage, 11 must harness her telekinetic power to rip off its limbs, or appendages, or whatever you want to call it. But the meat monster gets the better of her by grabbing her leg, likely with the hopes of smashing her to death as revenge for what she did to it back at the hospital. She should have just said, "Lego my Lego." That's bad. That's bad. That's not a good joke. Mike and the others grab hold of her and try to pull her back in, and Lucas severs the creature's grip with an axe, which sends it reeling just long enough for them to get into the car and escape. They go to Bradley's Big Buy, which is closed for the holiday, and break in to get supplies to help Eleven bandage up her wounded leg. At this point, I'm just starting to feel bad for old Bradley. His Big Buy store is constantly being terrorized by this evil girl. That one's definitely going on your permanent record. As the others scour for supplies, Mike and Eleven finally get some alone time to talk. Although Mike had no problem blurting out that he loved Eleven when she wasn't in the room earlier, when he's actually talking to her, he can't seem to find the words, because he's a puss.
I've never felt like this, with anyone before. And yeah, they do say it makes you crazy.
What makes you crazy?
You ever heard that term? Like the phrase, like blank makes you crazy, like the word.
This conversation is interrupted, as it always is whenever they talk one-on-one, ever, by Dustin's distress message coming through on the walkie-talkie from the Starcourt Mall. Through the guidance of Lucas, the group steals a bunch of fireworks to use as ammunition and head to the mall, where Eleven once again calls upon her gifts to murder some evil Russians before they could get to her friends. As Mike, Max, Nancy, Jonathan, Will, and Eleven are reunited with Dustin, Steve, Erica, and an ice cream girl named Robin Buckley, wow, the show has a lot of characters, Eleven collapses, realizing that the Mind Flayer implanted some slug in her leg. Ultimately, she has to painfully rip the thing out using TK, but before it can get away, Chief Hopper returns to smash it under his boot. As the newly reunited group of way too many characters makes a plan to, thankfully, split up, Hopper once again demonstrates his protectiveness over his surrogate daughter.
I can fight.
Better than any of us. But right now, I need you safe. This thing is after you. It's not after me.
Dustin, Steve, Erica, and Robin fill everyone else in on the reason that the Mind Flayer was able to access Hawkins again. A new gate to the Upside Down opened thanks to a secret Soviet operation underneath the mall. The plan for Eleven is just to get her out of there and get her to safety, seeing as how she's already exhausted a lot of her power. But things would go awry when Billy comes back for revenge. After everyone splits off to fulfill their part of the plan, those remaining at the mall are unable to leave because the engine of Nancy's car won't start. Not a problem on bikes, just saying. They go back to the mall to retrieve a spark plug from the model car in the food court, but as Eleven tries to flip the car over, she realizes she can't do it. From the moment she pulled the Demoslug out of her leg, her powers seem to have vanished. At the time, we don't know why she lost her powers, but a likely hypothesis is eventually presented.
You know what happens when someone has a stroke? The blood supply to the brain is cut off. It scrambles the signals in the brain to the point where the mind can forget how to do things, to eat, to speak, to walk. When you were attacked last year, I believe that your signals were scrambled in much the same way.
I think this makes sense. The slug the Mind Flayer used is similar to the slug used to take over Will's mind, so I don't see why it wouldn't be able to mess with Eleven's neural pathways. In any event, her powers are zapped. It's certainly an inopportune time for the elementary school cafeteria meat monster to crash through the ceiling looking for her. Thanks to a timely slingshot by Lucas to pop a balloon and grab the monster's attention, Elle, Mike, and Max manage to escape through the back doors of the Gap. For the first time in her life, Eleven is relegated to a useless bystander as Nancy and her crew try to drive away from the mall, hoping to lure Mr. Meaty away from the vulnerable Eleven. But once again, the hive mind-like connection that the Mind Flayer shares with Billy and the other creatures from the Upside Down creates issues for the human protagonists. Billy spots Eleven, Mike, and Max running out of the Gap, follows them, and knocks both Max and Mike out cold to claim his prize. He scoops up the injured Eleven and carries her back to the food courts to meet with Meaty so he can eat Eleven's meat. That is the absolute worst way I could have explained that. Billy places her before the monster, and without the aid of her telekinesis, she is powerless to fight back. Although she isn't able to do anything here, for the purposes of my character analysis, this is one of the most important moments in Eleven's history, because it allows us to see how much she has touched the lives of others, not with super abilities, but with who she is as a person. Every single one of them is willing to put their lives on the line to protect her, and they aren't just doing it to protect themselves. Once Hopper destroys the gate, the town should be safe, regardless of if Eleven survives. But the group comes through with their stolen fireworks, pelting the monster, which in turn also affects Billy. Eleven tries to make an escape, but Billy grabs her. He is the only human in the room who she hasn't befriended with her unique charm, so that's exactly what she attempts to do, reminding him of the happy memory that he had with his mom as a child. This gets through to Billy, the real Billy, and causes him, maybe for the first time, to overcome the control of the Mind Flayer and defy it by protecting Eleven and sacrificing himself. Meanwhile, underground, Joyce manages to destroy the gates of the Upside Down, causing the monster to fall dormant and collapse into nothing more than a large pile of human meat that would later be fed to Hawkins Elementary School students from the hours of 11 a.m. to noon. But that doesn't stop the bad news from rolling in for 11. When reuniting with Joyce, she learns that Hopper was caught in the explosion underground and most likely died when the gate closed. Her gift was gone, and her only proper father figure was dead. With no reliable family to go to, 11 is taken in by the next closest thing, the Byers family. Mike must have been seething when his own parents didn't pony up and fulfill his fantasy of having a live-in girlfriend during high school, but it makes sense considering that Joyce is one of the few adults who knows where 11 came from and knows the horrors of the Upside Down. The only issue is that the Byers don't plan on staying in Hawkins. This time, the government covers up what happened at the Starcourt Mall by claiming that there was a fire and making it seem as though Police Chief Jim Hopper died heroically, saving others from this fire. Even though this all happened in the middle of the night after the mall had closed, the townspeople accept this, and 11 proudly celebrates her dad as a hero. Obviously, Hopper is not really dead, but even if he had died, he would have left a good impression on 11 by doing something heroic. 11 is often referred to as a superhero by the other kids because she has superpowers, but it is what you do with those powers that determines your legacy. 3 months later, in October of 1985, several characters are all cleaning out the Byers' house in preparation for them to move. 11 reaches for a teddy bear in the closet, but when she can't reach it, she tries using her powers, which still do not work. Mike finds 11 struggling and lends a hand by reaching it for her. This leaves 11 feeling frustrated and insecure, but Mike tries to reassure her that he's sure her powers will come back. They exchange goodbyes, and Mike insists that they'll see each other for upcoming holidays. As 11 leaves, she admits that she heard Mike's confession to the rest of the group back at the cabin.
What did I say exactly?
Mike, I love you too.
The problem is, he can't seem to find the courage to say it to her face. The combination of Mike seeming perplexed by 11 sharing her feelings with him and the loss of her powers leave 11 feeling very insecure. As Joyce is clearing out the house, she finds a written note that Hopper was originally going to recite to 11 about boundaries, but really it's more of a note about how much she means to him and how much he cares about her. Joyce gives it to 11, which moved her to tears. With Dr. Owen's help, they're relocated to Lenora Hills, California, where for the first time in her life, 11 faces her most daunting challenge yet: public school. Having no form of education to this point, she struggles to catch up.
Very disappointing, Jane. Let's talk after break.
You could make the argument that it's just not fair to throw 11 into the fire like this, but what really is the alternative? You're not going to throw a teenager into kindergarten, and despite her struggles, just being in an environment around normal kids, well, you know what I mean, like California normal, actually seems to help her more than all of her previous years combined. Her speech improves drastically, and the fact that she's able to do written assignments at all is a huge step for a girl who didn't know the word friend 3 short years ago. Speaking of the friend situation, that isn't an area where she progresses quite as much. Being so far behind the other students makes her the subject of a lot of bullying, very similar to her situation back at Hawkins' lab. As 11 goes through all this, she clings to her memories of living in Hawkins with Hopper and takes pride in the fact that the closest thing she's ever had to an actual father died a hero. When she's given the assignment to present a historical figure with a visual aid for class, she makes a diorama of the cabin and shares that her dad was a hero who died in a mall fire. The class seizes this point of vulnerability to make fun of 11, and they destroy her diorama, very similar to the way that the kids in Hawkins' lab would torment her. She maintains a long-distance relationship with Mike during this time, but chooses to hide her social life struggles from him, to make it seem like she's making friends. She finds herself breaking the group's cardinal rule: friends don't lie. She may be doing this out of some level of denial and that fear of being a monster, like in Frankenstein. She desperately wants to believe that she can fit in. Another possible contributor is her insecurity in her relationship with Mike, who still never tells her that he loves her. It makes her think that he's not that serious about her, and she doesn't want to be a burden that he has to take care of. Plus, she doesn't want to lose the one close connection she really has at this point. Their first reunion is set for spring break, and when Mike comes to visit on March 21st, 1986, Will realizes that she's been lying about having friends, which is upsetting to him. 11's fears of being considered a monster were only about to get worse. The next day, on an outing to the roller skating rink with Mike and Will, 11 is confronted by her biggest bully, Angela. 11 is put on display and humiliated in front of Mike, as Angela leads the charge on everyone swarming her and dumping her own milkshake down the front of her dress. 11 reaches a breaking point and snaps. But without the aid of telekinesis to make her enemies wet their pants or fall off a skateboard, she's got to resort to more obvious tactics. She grabs a roller skate from some guy and slams it in Angela's face, giving Angela a grade 2 concussion. This is the first time she's ever had to resort to physical violence. While most kids learn not to hit others from a young age, she never had that luxury, and as a result, her worst fear comes true. 11 is treated like a monster as they wait for the paramedics to make sure that Angela is okay. Aggravated assault, the charges just keep stacking up. Even Mike has a look of fear on his face after seeing Angela's injury, which only exacerbates 11's anxiety, which she confronts him about the next day.
Everyone looks at me like I'm a monster.
Well, they just don't know you.
You think I'm a monster too.
What?
Yesterday, the way you looked at me. You were scared of me.
Before he can offer any reassurance, police arrive at the door to put 11 in handcuffs. Apparently, Angela's family finally decided to press charges. I guess 11's extensive criminal history has finally caught up with her. All the kids in the neighborhood watch as she's taken away. I'm sure that didn't help with her Frankenstein's monster complex. Next, she's taken in for questioning, where she probably should have spoken to a lawyer first.
Did you want to kill her?
I don't know.
Points for honesty? 11 is admitted into the system and is in the process of being transferred to a juvenile facility when the car she's being transferred in is stopped and 11 is greeted by an old friend, Dr. Owens. He explains that there's trouble in Hawkins and that she may be the only hope to save the town once more. She's got to be getting tired of this. Owens also alerts her that he no longer works for the government. I guess they didn't look too favorably upon him after the whole secret Russian base being built under his nose debacle. But there's a new guy who's essentially in charge of protecting Hawkins, Army Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan. The only problem is that he thinks 11 is responsible for a recent string of supernatural deaths in Hawkins, and he's looking for her, right now. It's not hard to understand how that might have been not helpful for her doubts about her self-image.
What if I'm not good? What if I'm the monster?
She also points out that she no longer has any special abilities and probably wouldn't be much help, but Dr. Owens is prepared with a plan to get them back. Owens takes 11 to a secret base disguised as a shed out in the middle of nowhere in Ruth, Nevada. Shed out in the middle of nowhere in Ruth, Nevada. They take an elevator down to an old abandoned missile silo that's been converted into a full-on lab completely dedicated to studying and helping 11. It must have been difficult for her to agree to go down into a secret underground lab, given that she spent most of her life trying to escape such a situation. That's probably why Dr. Owens waited to reveal who is overseeing the project. Dr. Brenner steps out.
Hello, 11.
The man responsible for kidnapping her and torturing her mother. He tries to convince her that although she has likely grown to hate him, he has always wanted what's best for her and knows that she needs his help. She knows that he's lying. He absolutely never wanted what's best for her, so she tries to make a run for it, but soldiers crash in to stop her, and she's sedated, proving that the second part of his statement was true. 11 does need his help. When she comes to again, she is trapped inside a scene from her past of Henry giving her instructions in the Rainbow Room after she overslept as a child. 11 tries desperately to escape this, while Owens, Brenner, and the other scientists observe as she floats inside of a new sensory deprivation tank called Nina, which has monitors playing surveillance footage from 1979. The idea is that since 11 has no memory of how she first channeled her abilities, they would take her through that portion of her life again. The footage they show her starts from where she can barely illuminate a light bulb and goes right up to her powerful moment of triumph against Henry. This supports the idea that her inability to call upon her powers since removing the slug was indeed related to a mental block rather than a physical block or a supernatural one. The fact that she's going through video footage also supports the idea that her memories were permanently lost after the 1979 massacre. My theory is that 11 is actually just seeing the surveillance footage and her imagination fills in the rest. Previously, when she entered someone's memory, such as her mom's or Billy's, the memories played out just like they did in real life. But this time, we see her touching her head to confirm that her long hair is no longer there. And we see her tear up at the idea of being back in confinement. So she's not simply accessing old memories, but she's recreating them. This also explains why when she tries to escape, every door just leads back to the Rainbow Room. She can't go somewhere that's not shown on the tape. It would be like trying to go somewhere in a game where you're not supposed to go. The data simply doesn't exist. There are a couple of exceptions, however, where her memories really do seem to come back. Memories of Henry's massacre start to resurface in quick flashes before getting to that part in the surveillance tapes.
That was another memory, a more powerful one, invading from your subconscious.
There's also a scene where she's attacked by some of the other kids in the Rainbow Room while the cameras are off, meaning that they wouldn't have that footage, and this must be something that resurfaced purely from 11's memory. Scientifically, it makes sense that thinking about one memory from that time would remind you of another. I think about times reminiscing with friends. If someone brings up one old inside joke, all the others come flooding back. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, it's unlikely that someone would be able to recover from a major memory loss event like Eleven did in real life. It doesn't really make a difference either way, but it would have been cool if the show had just tweaked a couple things to maintain the more scientifically accurate approach. It even kind of fits in with the story that Dr. Brenner provides about why the sensory deprivation tank is named Nina. Nina was the name of an opera where a woman's husband is killed and the memory is too traumatic for her to accept, so she just keeps appearing at the train station to pick him up. Brenner pushes hard to keep her assimilated in Nina, only letting her out when she literally has a heart attack from the shocking images of the 1979 massacre. When she awakes, despite just having been revived from what they describe as cardiac arrest, Eleven strikes Dr. Brenner, deserved, and makes a run for it. Once again, the soldiers try to stop her, but this time she's able to throw them off of her with an outburst of her good old telekinetic power. However, when Dr. Brenner approaches her, she discovers that her powers have not fully returned, and she isn't able to replicate her success against him. He reveals that Eleven essentially suffered a stroke when the Mind Flayer injected her with that slug, and that the connections in her brain that access her powers were scrambled. It makes sense that Dr. Brenner would recognize this, as it's likely the same thing he did to Henry when he inserted the soteria into him. This time, as a willing participant in the Nina project, she goes back into the sensory deprivation tank where she sees flashes of the massacre from 1979. She panics, and to save her from another heart attack, they pull her out. As she comes to, she demonstrates that she's come up with her own interpretation of what she saw.
I know what happened now. I killed them tonight, Papa. I killed them all.
Eleven has become so set on the idea of seeing herself as the monster that she assumes that it must be her that committed that horrible act. The next day, brain scans reveal that she is now regressing instead of getting better. It almost seems as though Eleven may be avoiding getting her powers back, thinking that she'll hurt people again if she does. Dr. Brenner explains to Eleven that her definition of monsters and superheroes is too simple.
You speak of monsters, superheroes. That's the stuff of myth and fairy tales. Reality, truth, is rarely so simple. People are not so easily defined. Only by facing all of ourselves, the good and the bad, can we become whole.
Eleven explains that maybe she doesn't want to become whole, so Dr. Brenner tries to manipulate her using the same words 8 once did. This place is not a prison. But unlike 8, he has no intention of really letting her leave. His speech convinces her, and she gets back into Nina, this time experiencing what really happened on September 8th, 1979, when Henry attacked the lab. With this, Eleven stands up, and without any formal tests, stands up in front of Nina, a gigantic steel basin, and she lifts it up. It is clear that her powers are back. Brenner informs her that her similarities to Henry stopped that day when she sent him into the Upside Down, and that she demonstrated more power than he ever had, and great potential. Dr. Owens breaks the news to Eleven that her friends are in great danger, as Vecna/Henry has taken 3 more lives. As she tries to leave with Dr. Owens, Brenner rescinds what he said earlier and refuses to let her leave, stressing that she needs to undergo more testing. She insists that she is going to leave, and if Dr. Brenner tries to stop him, she'll kill him. She busts down the door, but Dr. Brenner sedates her and forces her into the same kind of shock collar that he once used to torture too. But just as this happens, Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan and his army find their way into the underground lab. Dr. Brenner tries to escape with a still mostly sedated Eleven, but a helicopter is waiting for them as they exit, and it immediately shoots Brenner. Just as they have Eleven in their sights and are about to kill her, they are temporarily distracted by Jonathan, Will, and Mike approaching in a pizza van, which creates just enough time for Eleven to stand up and give the men in the helicopter the last disturbing image that they will ever see. Eleven is staring them down with one hand out as she smashes the helicopter into the ground, confirming that her powers are back in full force. In her final moments with Dr. Brenner, he attempts to convince her that he cares about her, most likely a last-ditch attempt to play to her sympathy and save his own life. He had seen how Henry used a similar tactic to get her to release him, but Eleven has learned a lot about who deserves her sympathy since then, leaving her original papa to die. She has come to realize that she is not Frankenstein's monster. In this story, the doctor is the true monster. The newly reformed group of Eleven, Mike, Will, Jonathan, and Jonathan's new friend Argyle realize they can't make it back to Hawkins in time to stop Vecna, who has plans to kill Max to open up another gate. But with her power restored, she doesn't necessarily have to. Just as she projected herself into the headspace of Terry and Billy in the past, she can do the same in order to protect Max's mind from being invaded by Vecna. She knows that Vecna will be in Max's head, and this is where she can stop him. Since newcomer Argyle is a pizza delivery boy, he gets them into a Surfer Boy pizza restaurant after hours where they build a makeshift sensory deprivation tank. Mike even makes her an eye cover out of pizza boxes so that she can focus. Once again, he struggles to express his feelings and tell her that he loves her before she locates and delves into the mindscape of Max. Max has also discovered that Vecna likes to prey on sad or angry memories, so she attempts to avoid him by hiding in happy memories, such as the snowball where she had her first kiss with Lucas 2 years earlier. But when Vecna discovers her, he finds this memory and starts to rot it away. As he begins the death ritual that he had performed on the other 3 victims, 11 shocks both of them by showing up in the memory to protect Max. 11 and Vecna battle within the space of Max's mind, a battle 7 years in the making. They leave it all on the court, but this time, Vecna triumphs and traps both her and Max in his own mindscape. 11 pleads with him, offering that Papa is dead and he can let go of his anger. But any human compassion inside of him died a long time ago. Vecna slowly strangles her to death with one of the Upside Down's famous vines, and 11 sits there helplessly as he turns his attention to Max. But then, she hears Mike's voice echoing through the mindscape.
I love you! Help! Do you hear me? I love you!
And all it took was the near destruction of their town and 11 literally being strangled to death. But like in their first battle, we see that thoughts of love channeled by 11 triumph over the thoughts of fear and anger that Vecna sources his power through. She's able to muster enough power to escape the chokehold and pin down Vecna. At the same time, Elle's friends attack Vecna's body in the real world, causing him to leave her with this threat.
You and your friends believe you have won, don't you? But this is only the beginning. The beginning of the end.
However, all of these efforts may have been too late. Vecna is still able to kill Max, which completes his ritual and opens a 4th gate, ripping a huge fault line through Hawkins. Still tending to her in the fading mindscape of Max's head, 11 uses her telekinesis to pump Max's heart for her until it gets pumping on its own again, using sheer force of will to bring her back to life where she just barely manages to hang on in a coma. It's very similar to a scene from the novel Carrie, where Carrie used TK to bring a beating heart to a stop because of her rage. Elle uses TK to restart someone's heart because of her love. This life-saving action seems to stop Hawkins from being completely swallowed up into the Upside Down, but a lot of destruction still took place. In addition, when Robin, Steve, and Nancy exit the Creel house, they discover that Vecna is no longer where they left him, meaning he's still out there and still dangerous. After coming back to reality in the pizza shop and sharing all that she had seen, they set out on the 2-day trek back to Hawkins to reconnect with their families and loved ones. While visiting Max in the hospital, Elle is unable to see her in the void, which worries her. They all work together to fix 11's cabin that the Mind Flayer had nearly destroyed last summer. As if fate were trying to take her on a roller coaster of emotions, as she's cleaning up her room, Hopper walks in, alive and in the flesh after being held captive by the Russians. 11 reveals that while he was said to be dead, she never gave up hope.
I kept it open. I kept the door open 3 inches. I never stopped believing.
Which doesn't make perfect sense, because if Hopper was alive, wouldn't she have been able to locate him? Maybe her range doesn't extend to the other side of the world. But while we've seen 11 continually struggle with her internal conflict of believing she's a monster, her relationship with Hopper is the thing that continually separates her from that. Where Henry looks to anger to ignite his powers, 11 consistently looks to love for hers. The emotional reunion continues outside, and that's where things get stranger. The ash-like particles from the Upside Down can be seen dropping down into Hawkins, and 11 realizes that Vecna was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. I'll be adding on to my analysis of 11 once we've seen the finale, and I've got a bunch of other Stranger Things character analysis videos lined up, which I'll keep adding to that playlist on the left. Check out my second channel, Pumpkin Metal, if you want emo, pop punk, and metal band histories, and if you love Stranger Things or horror in general, make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell, and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.